Hello and welcome to the Focus on Greatness podcast. My name is Hiram and I'm the host of this podcast, and I enjoy doing what I do. And this platform is where men are helping men to be able to redefine greatness for service. And today is going to be one of those great conversations that I believe that we're going to gain the tools, the knowledge, the wisdom that we need to be able to deal with this thing called feelings. It's something that we all deal with and we all are challenged with, but I believe in this conversation we'll learn how to be able to effectively and correctly, I'll even go to say, to be able to share our feelings the right way. So before we get into this conversation, I do want you to do me a favor. I want you to share this with at least one person, one man that you know, one of your friends that you know that can be able to benefit from this type of conversation. And while you're doing that, for those that are listening to this, as well as watching this live, if this is your first time listening to me and on any podcast platform and you have not subscribed, please make sure that you do that. If this is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever form of platform that you're on, make sure that you subscribe and then let me know how did you connect with this podcast. And so I can be able to know how I am being effective, being able to help you in any area of your life. And so let's get into this conversation. I'm excited. I'm ready to learn, and I hope that you're also ready to learn as well. And so do me a favor and welcome Israel for me. How you doing, sir?
I'm brilliant. Thank you, Hiram. I'm really, really excited to be here and honestly a little bit intimidated by that intro. I'll do my best to serve, but I'm like, yes, oh sir. Gosh, I'm the guy with all the answers.
Well, I promise you this. And for those that are listening, those that are watching, I want you to understand this man has the wisdom that I believe Israel, even just through our initial conversation, I believe that you are really full of wisdom and help and tools to be able to really help us. And so, and that's really, when we talked, I was like, yes, I have to have Israel on, and we really got to get this information so we can all get the help we need so we can be able to be better in this area. So before we dive in, do me a favor and introduce yourself to those that are watching as well as listening, and then we'll dive into our conversation.
Absolutely. So I live on the east coast of Australia. I'm about halfway between Sydney and Brisbane, for those of you that know our lovely island continent thing. I have a beautiful wife. I've been married. It'll be 18 years this October, and 2 children, 15 and 11. That's really the focus of my life, trying to be a good dad and a good husband. And for work, I have gone through many iterations, being an IT consultant, a professional photographer, a health and wellness business I helped my wife co-found. And now the work that I do is to help men, I suppose, be a little more connected with their emotions, be a little less angry, maybe yell at the kids a bit less, find a little bit more peace in their day-to-day. Yeah. So I work as a coach, I do some speaking, and I'm working on some group concepts for a bit later this year. But generally my work is to help support men either in their own, men who are in business for themselves or in leadership or management sort of positions, and just help the guys kind of recognize that all the answers they really need are actually inside already, and that it's up to us to be responsible for ourselves as men and to take the actions we need to take to bring out that best version of ourselves, so that's what I'm here to be, is just a bit of a guide on that journey for a lot of men. So
yes, sir. And see, and y'all already know and see just right now, this is why he's on.
Thank you.
He's about to help us all. He's about to help us. So I want to go ahead, because one of the things, and we talked about this a little bit, but one of the things that, I really want to do, and I'll even share just with me, I'm a person that was raised kind of where I would internalize a lot of my frustrations as a young boy. And so then when they would come out, it's explosive. It's right. Very, very loud, very, angry, those type of things. And as I grew up and recognized just as a man, the different stress points that I have now as a father, as a husband, working my job, looking for future, trying to do all of these things, and even something like doing the podcast and still working a regular 9 to 5. All of those things are added stress points. And so sometimes that emotional strain and stress does still bottle up or come out in some form of lash out, or some way that is really not effective. So the question I want to start, I guess, with is, how do we start to work on this context of, one, I guess, really starting to where we're not bottling our emotions as a man, and really being able to deal with how we expressing it in an effective way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, the place to start from my perspective is accepting that we have emotions, accepting that it's a normal part of being human.
Yeah.
Like when we think about the kind of the social conditioning that we receive as men, whether you take a big hit on the sports field, or whether you really find yourself struggling, like you said, to balance and juggle all of the things that we have in modern life,
Yeah.
we have this expectation that we're the rock, we're strong, we can shoulder the burden, we don't have to break down, we're not allowed to break down or to feel or to show any sense of vulnerability. So I think really for me, the first step is just to go, I have emotions and that's okay. I like, giving ourselves permission to feel what we're feeling, not bottling it or stuffing it down or trying to sort of sideline it or push it away, and that can be anything. That can be, fear or anger or sadness or grief or whatever, right? The whole gamut. But it really just starts with giving ourselves space and permission to just go, oh, I'm really feeling it. And just to be able to sit in the discomfort, or like the unfamiliarity of feeling things and letting ourselves be kind of carried up in that emotion, The thing that I find really, I suppose, dangerous about that social conditioning is exactly what you said. It reaches like a critical mass. It reaches like this boiling point, and suddenly we explode. And then the lash out, we end up hurting people we love because they're nearest to us, and that's where we feel safest. So we naturally let that guard down for that split second. And like, what are you talking about? And it just comes out, right? And it's, I think, the part about, first of all, like, again, normal, right? So I don't want to shame anybody or make anyone feel like that's not okay. It is okay if that's all you've learned. You're just doing the best you can. And if all you've been taught is stuff it down, don't let yourself feel, boys don't cry, toughen up, have a cup of cement, all that sort of stuff, right? Right? Like, it was like, yeah, geez, like, how many times have I heard that? When take the other hit, you can do it, have another one, like. When we really stop and recognize that that's all we've been taught, that's all we've been demonstrated or role modeled, it's very rare to see a man openly express his feelings in a vulnerable way. And critically here, it's very rare to see that in the first place, but secondly, it's rare to see that and not have it turned into a meme, or not have it shamed or belittled or criticized, right? Like, how many of you listening have seen like the meme of Michael Jordan crying his eyes out at a press conference, and it's been copied and pasted his face with all the tears and the snot and the blubber and all that? Man, that's like such a display of strength and courage. I love seeing that kind of stuff because to me, regardless of who's watching, and he's like one of the most famous athletes in the world, who's now really successful in doing what he does, and he still feels it. You go, well, wow, if he's got it all and he still feels those moments of emotion and vulnerability, and he's willing to put that out on a public platform, that's brave. That's really brave. So number one, accepting that we have emotions. It's very normal. Number two, recognizing that allowing ourselves to feel our emotions is going to be weird. If it's not something you've ever done, if something comes up and you sort of go into this mode of I can't demonstrate that. I can't show that. I got to,
Right.
release the chokehold on your emotions and let things feel in your body. Let it come out through tears. Let it come
Yeah.
out through whatever it feels like,
Yeah.
and just start to practice sitting in that discomfort. Finally, and this is, I think, the real linchpin for me, is just recognizing that showing our emotions publicly is courageous. It's an act of bravery and courage. It's not an act of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Yeah.
to me, because of so much of the male psyche is about, our kind of caveman roots of being the hunter-gatherer and the alpha and the strong one and all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
when we can truly go, I'm going to channel that bravery and that courage that I would normally use to take down the saber-toothed tiger or score a touchdown or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Right.
And I'm going to channel that into opening my heart a little bit and letting the world in that little bit more and letting people see how I'm truly going.
Yeah.
To me, like, man, there's that's top of the rung for me, because it is at our most vulnerable when we can stand in that place with our heart wide open, exposed, raw, and still be powerful in that moment. That is the pinnacle of bravery for me.
So, one, I do love the context of the three things that you gave. One of the things that I do realize, like you stated, is that there is this this teaching that a lot of men get, either intentionally or just through life, where we are taught that expressing our emotions is wrong. If we show any form of emotion through tears, or it's automatically considered as like being weak. It's, or it's not manly, and so all of these negative contexts. So sometimes it's almost like we are afraid to be able to express our emotions, because, like you said earlier, we're afraid of whatever the backlash would be.
Right.
And surely, as a husband, sometimes I've talked to some men, and sometimes it's like I don't want to express my emotions, because if I express my emotions, will she, as my wife, look at me as being weak?
Right.
Those type of things. So how do we start to kind of get through that? Because really, it's a base of fear. How do we get past this fear of being able to express? I know you said we need to acknowledge it, and then really start being okay with it. But it's like, how do we get past this fear of it?
Let me ask you, have you ever done something in your life that was either dangerous or a little bit frightening to start with, and you did it anyway?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
So preferably, well, I should be good because it was in my younger years, so I won't get
So don't do this at home, kids, whatever you're about to hear.
Yeah, please don't ever do what I'm about to say. One of the things that I thought first came to my mind is I remember driving at night, and I didn't want to stop. It was a four-way stop sign coming up, and I didn't want to stop. And it was very dark where I was. So I turned off my headlights and drove through the four-way stop, without.
Wow.
Right.
Definitely don't do this one at home, kids. My goodness. We're fortunate that Hiram is in fact still with us and not T-boned somewhere at an intersection. Right. So I was thinking something slightly less illegal, like skateboarding, for instance, because that's something that I've done through my youth, and I was thinking the very first time, I don't know how much you or your listeners know about skateboarding, but there's this thing called dropping in, which is where you stand at the top of a ramp and you hang your skateboard over, and then you plant your feet and you lean down and you go into the ramp, right? So when you're standing, some of these ramps are like anywhere from 6 feet to like 12, 14 feet off the ground when you're standing at the top and you're looking straight down. And some of them are even like vertical, like it's literally, there's nothing underneath you. You're just going straight down before you hit the ramp, right? So,
wow.
Right. So you see like the pro skaters like, Tony Hawk and all these famous guys. This is what they do day in, day out. It's their bread and butter. But I tell you, as a young kid, I was 12 and I was at the first good ramp that was built near my house where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there with some friends and we were just starting on the flat and we we're working our way up. And then eventually by the end of that session, I was like, I really want to drop in. I really want to try and do this thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I got there and I stood there and I'd lean over and then I'd pull back and then I'd lean over again, then I'd pull back. And this went on for like 20 minutes. Anyway, my friend's mom was like, we got to go. Like, I can't stand here for another 6 hours waiting for you to do this. We got to get in the car and get out of here. I'm like, okay, I've got to do this. Bang. And I did
Right.
it. And I fell off and my skateboard went flying and I slid down the ramp and I had a
Mm.
few tears and all of that. But I did it.
Right.
So there was a bit of pain, bit of discomfort, bit of embarrassment, but generally, like, and this is for me, this is true for fears
Mm-hmm.
most of the time in life, because we live in this amazing, abundant, fortunate society where we don't typically come up against, you know, life-threatening things like a saber-toothed tiger or whatever.
Right.
So a lot of the fears we experience are only in our head and they're not life-threatening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is just to acknowledge the fear. And then the second thing is to just do the thing anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And being brave in that way, then see what happens. If you want to really start to, I mean, even if you could you could even start it with a conversation with your wife or your spouse or partner or what have you, and just say, look, I really want to get a bit more in touch with what I'm feeling. And there's probably going to be some, because, you know, coming from, okay, I'm a bit all over the place. Let me just sharpen this up with a story, right?
Yeah.
My wife said to me 18 months ago, you're an angry person. I'm not happy with the outbursts. I'm drawing a new boundary. Either you address this and resolve whatever is causing your anger and learn how to process it healthy, or you're no longer welcome in the house. It was a stay or go kind of ultimatum, right? Now,
Right.
I would love for your listeners and your other friends to not get to that point with your partner, right? Where they're like, either you sort your out or you're out, you know?
Right. Yes.
Because
Sir.
that's really, that's not a great place. But if you come from that place with that openness with your partner to at least say, look, I'm tired of hurting you. I'm tired of lashing out. I don't want to create that sort of space anymore. I want to learn to process this, but here's what I need.
Yeah.
I need you to give me the space. If I'm feeling my emotions and if I'm looking a bit uncomfortable, I don't want you to try and race in and fix me, but I also don't want you to race in and judge me. I need to just experience this and go through this. And that little bit of like prefix or preface to sort of set it up. So the next time, you know, your partner comes home and you're sitting on the edge of the bed with tears streaming down your face because you've just let yourself feel what needs to be felt. You don't want to create this with, what the hell are you doing? Like, really? You know, you don't want that. You want to be able to say, I'm all right, honey. I'm just letting myself feel some stress and just release it. It's okay. You know?
Yeah.
So having that, you know, but the fear associated with it, breaking that fear down can be as simple as having that little conversation to commence, or it can also be a case of you feel scared about opening your heart and you do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, for all of your listeners, I'm sure you can all remember maybe the first time you worked up the courage to ask a girl or a guy out on a date, right? The first time you wanted to express something like saying, I love you. You know, there's fear associated with each of those things because they're all that same opening of the heart. They're all that same vulnerability where you're saying, this is the real me. This isn't the mask I put on for society. This isn't the armor that I put on to be tough as a man. You know, those little moments of softness, we can all reflect on those and just go, right, whether you went out with the girl or whether she just stone cold rejected you, like, doesn't matter, right? Like, we've all got plenty of those stories. But it's just about that first step of going, hey, there's a little bit of openness here I'm offering, and what do you think? And it's scary it's scary, but we don't die.
Yeah.
We don't die.
You that part is right. We don't die. And I think that's important surely for, I mean, just in life. And so in anybody that's listening and watching, I want to make sure that, and I ask this question intentionally, not just because I know that this is something that a lot of men struggle with, but even on my own self. And sometimes it's hard or difficult sometimes to be able to express that because of those fears. And but I love that you're encouraging us, Israel, in reference to just step out anyway, just
Yeah.
express it in anyway. Because the other thing that I do know is that if we're not expressing these feelings, if we're not expressing these emotions, the emotion doesn't go anywhere. The
No, that's right.
the you know
It
the
stays right
pain
there
is
where you
still,
left it.
yeah, it's 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 still there, so it has to express itself in some way.
Mm,
And reality is I'll again speak for myself, is I don't like the way it comes out, and I
right.
know that it's a better way for me to be able to express those things. And so, for the person that's listening or the person that's watching, I want you to also think about this. Think about, maybe you were, and it's not everybody. So everybody, because everybody doesn't have the same story, but maybe you were the one where when you were a child, you were always being yelled at.
Mm,
You were always being, the anger or the frustration of whatever that parent or person was going through. You were now the brunt of that as a child, and you were the one that got that. And remember, when those things was happening, you didn't like that feeling. You
mm,
didn't like how that felt, how that made you feel. But now, as we are now the other on the other end, because we're not expressing it the correct way, and because we're not allowing it to come out the way that Israel is already helping us with, we're now being the person that was doing it to
mm,
us. We're now
right.
putting and throwing it on them. And the purpose of this conversation was so that we can stop it now, so we can make the adjustments and changes, so we can have, one, I believe, a more stress-free life. But then we can have better relationships, and not just with our spouses, but even with our children, and we don't have to now
Mm,
repeat this same cycle over again.
yeah. I mean, you raise a really, really beautiful point there in that, and I can talk to this firsthand, right? Like my parents split when I was about 7,
Mhm.
and then they both remarried. And so I was fortunate to have grown up with 4 parents, basically, my
Mhm.
mum, my stepdad, my dad, my stepmom.
Right.
But both men in my life when I was young, and my dad continued this through most of his life,
Mhm.
um, were really angry. I would bear exactly what you were describing. I would bear the brunt of that.
Wow.
And I mean, as a parent, it's so funny. I'm sure for those of you in the audience watching or listening, if you are parents, have you ever had that moment where something comes out of your mouth and you're like, holy crap, that was my dad or that was my
Yeah.
mom? Like that was
Right.
literally them speaking from the past generation through me.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
as a young kid, we literally just absorb everything as programming, as this is how
Mm.
an adult parent is supposed to behave.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
very unconscious. It's not intentional. It's not a choice. It's
Mhm.
just a default setting, right? Like it's, oh, okay, that's what I'm being taught by
Mm.
example. So that's what I will do as my default. And so this work of truly
Mm.
acknowledging and processing our feelings and learning to be the better parent and the better husband and all of that, it actually starts with that intentional choice and to sort
Yeah.
of go, okay, I know that there's default settings in my head. I know that there's patterns that I will drop back into in moments of high stress or high fatigue or what have
Mhm.
you, right? But I choose to take a different course from a place of love for me and for the people that I love that are in my immediate family. Like that, and that choice is the really important piece,
Yeah.
and yeah, like everything you've said, Hiram, like it's just such powerful work, and it's so important to be able to be the circuit breaker of those sorts of patterns.
Mhm.
Really, that's that piece about being a responsible man, like taking full responsibility for all of our actions, positive,
Right.
negative, doesn't matter, But when we really take full responsibility in our lives, and again, that can be scary AF, man. That can be really intense to go,
Right.
there's a lot that I have to cop on the shoulder here. You know, there's a lot of
Right.
stuff that I need to take ownership of. But the
Mhm.
beautiful part of that is that when we do, that puts us in the powerful position of being able to break those sorts of cycles,
Mhm.
of being
Mhm.
able to turn our gaze inward and do the work and then become a better parent, build
Yeah.
those better, stronger relationships, you know, become a more emotionally connected and in tune kind of man.
Yeah. 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 Now, let me ask this, as we continue to dive into this, through I know you have a coaching program where you're actually helping men with this very same thing that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the things that you started to see in reference to as the men started to get into this mode of expressing their feelings and being able to be aware of those things and knowing how to do it effectively? What are some of the things that you started to see, in reference to just transformation within those people? What
Mm.
are some of the things that you started to see as an impact of that?
One of the best examples is one of my clients who's just finished up with me after about 7 or 8 months. And when we first met, he had been kicked out of his house. His wife had said, "You got to go sort your stuff out, and you're no
Mhm.
longer okay living in the same house," because he was an absolute workaholic.
Mm.
He was disconnected and withdrawn from everybody, and he was
Wow.
just not really, um, I suppose, emotionally present. You know,
Mhm.
everything was just in the background there. He'd sort of squished it all back,
Yeah.
and so he reached out to me and said, "Look, I'm in this position, and I've been listening to your podcast, and I really want to kind of dig in some more and do some work with you, and I think you can help." I went, "Okay, great.
Mhm.
Let's sort of set out what is it you want." He said, "Well, I want to be back home. I want to be able to be the husband that my wife wants me to be. I want to be the dad my kids need me to be, and I want to
Mm.
be able to show up for them in a way that lets me move back into my family unit, you know."
Yeah.
And one of the things we started with, one of the things I've come to learn, and in my background, which I didn't really touch on earlier, I've been diagnosed with depression about 11 years ago, anxiety
Wow.
about 4 years ago. I lost my
Mm.
own dad to suicide about 2 years ago. So, you know, there's been a lot of up and down that I've had to learn to process.
Wow.
And one of the things that I learned very early on in the piece when I was first diagnosed with depression was that our physical state has such a bearing on our mental and emotional resilience and our ability to sit comfortably with these things. So,
Mhm.
you know, if you imagine the work of kind of unpicking and unpacking like 20, 30, 40 years of kind of one mode of behavior,
Mhm.
it's like kind of running a marathon, right? Like it's quite tiring. It wears you
Right.
out, and you sort of and it
Mhm.
takes a little effort to get into the groove, and then you're like, oh, you sort of end up with like this emotional hangover, like you feel really drained. You can't
Yeah.
do that from a baseline of being really worn out,
Mhm.
right? So a lot of us are sleep deprived. A lot of us are fueling our body in not the great ways. You know, we're
Right.
drinking too much alcohol, too much coffee. We're just not looking after this machinery that we walk around in every day.
Yeah.
And and the way I start this conversation is always with, let's just get as much of the machinery humming as possible before we go digging into the emotional stuff, because that can start
Mm.
to unleash some fatigue and some other physical things. And one of my dear friends has this beautiful quote, which is, "A tired mind is an a-hole,"
Mm.
right? Whenever whenever we're tired, whenever our brains are fatigued, and I'm sure you can all relate to this, when you've come home
Mhm.
after a really tough day working or like dealing with a lot of challenges, and you sort of
Yes.
you've used up all of the decision making power and the ability to stay peaceful even though you're surrounded by idiots or whatever it is, right? Like you
Right.
kind of come home and you're just like, I got nothing left. And then the kids start jumping on you. And then your wife's asking you 20 things about the weekend. And then something else happens. And you're like, ah, you know, right? So in that moment, you can kind of appreciate, okay, I've got a really tired mind and I'm not showing up as my best self. So this
Mhm.
is where that thing is. We just need to give ourselves rest, peace, nurturing, compassion. Before we do any of the emotional stuff, it's really important to get our physical selves under control, you know? And I mean, I teach all of this. I'm doing there's a whole heap of free stuff about all of these things on my podcast, which your listeners and watchers or viewers can jump in and check out.
Mhm.
It's called the Thrive methodology. What I call it, it's like 7 different things that I say, like, if we just focus on these things, that puts us in the best position to thrive, and then
Yeah.
from there, we're at a much stronger foundation, and we can start to dig in and go, all right, now I'm ready to open this little heart box here and just, see what's inside and see what comes out. So I really feel like that's the starting point.
Yeah.
And then what I see from that, I see men start to become more aware of what their patterns are, start to become more aware of the pain that they have been causing themselves and that they've been causing others,
Mhm.
start to become more aware of sort of thought patterns that have been going on that have been triggering them to go into dark spirals. And they go, oh, wait, that's what just happened. Right. No longer yelling at children, no longer arguing with the partner. That client I started talking about 6-7 months down the track, he's back home.
Wow.
And everything is with his
good.
wife is better than ever. And he said to me on our last call, he got really emotional. He said, thank you for helping me put my family back together. And that's what's possible when you start becoming in touch with and what's the word? In touch with your emotions, but also when you take ownership of your emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. I think for the person that is listening, person that is watching, even myself as I'm listening, Israel, this is the help that we need. I believe the context of our ability and who we are all here to be able to serve in this aspect and serve others and serve in different areas of our lives. And our relationships is one of the greatest areas that we serve in. But when we don't learn what you're sharing with us today, is majority of the time the place that we damage the most.
Right.
And so through this conversation, I believe and hope that everyone that is listening or watching is learning these tools and these things that we need so that we can become really emotionally healthy and being able to then be able to learn how to express what we already have. We are emotional beings. And so, because of that, we have to learn how to be able to express this because, as we already have stated, a lot of us have not been taught how to do it correctly.
Right.
And so, if I would say this, if you're a person, if you're a man that's listening or watching this, and you say, "Listen, I'm what I'm listening to. I'm in reference to I hear myself in this conversation. I hear, I know that this is where my struggle is. This is where what I need help in. I don't want to lose my marriage. I don't want my children to resent me because of how I make them feel. I don't want to lose my job because I always explode in my emotions because of things that happen. I want you to do me a favor. And I want you to not only go find Israel's podcast and listen to it and be a part of that, subscribe to his conversation so that you can get the help. But what I also want you to do is I want you to connect with him. I want you to be able to get the help. The purpose of this podcast and what we do on here and what I really wanted, why I wanted to be able to have someone like Israel on is because this is real service and helping people to get to the place that they're supposed to be in life. This is a part of that. And so I wanted to make sure that I'm bringing people onto the platform that I know could help us with the things that we daily struggle with to get to the place that we need to be in life. So if that is you, I promise you, all of his information will be in the description below, all of his links and information, and you can connect with him and start learning and walking in this context so we can learn how to express this correctly. Now, I'm telling you this because I'm doing it. I'm about to go, I'm gonna make sure that I'm listening to his podcast, so I can get the emotional help, the things that I need, so I can be a better effective. Because I just like you, I don't want to lose my marriage because I don't know
Mm,
how to express myself. I have two wonderful boys that are following my example,
right.
and I don't want to lead them in the wrong direction when it comes to reference to our emotions and how as men we're supposed to express that. And I don't want them to grow up and feel that screaming or bottling it up is the right way to deal with when it comes to our emotions. So Israel, I'm thankful for this conversation. I'm thankful for the wisdom that you have given unto us. I told y'all in the beginning he was going to help us. I
You called it,
knew it.
man.
I
You called
knew
it.
he was going to do it. Yes, sir. So I'm thankful and grateful. But before I let you go, even though I don't want to let you go, but before I let you go, do me a favor. I always love to ask the everyone that I have on. I love to ask this question because I believe I one personally. I just love the definition. I love the way that people answer this. Is what's greatness to you? What do you define greatness as?
To me, greatness is being able to, I suppose, being able to show up as our best self,
Mm,
but not doing that because of like external expectations or because of fear or because of striving for an external validation or achievement. Like for me,
yeah,
greatness, true greatness, is showing up as our best selves because it's the right thing to do and because it's something we choose for us.
yeah,
So individually, we choose, okay, I want to be the best version of me for me.
mm,
And then that will naturally flow outward in my life to my relationships, to my family, to my co-workers and so forth. But to start with, I'm worthy enough to choose that I want to show up as my best self for myself. That's to me is greatness.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that. It is, and that I believe that's that's one of a wonderful example or definition of what greatness is, and I believe it's something that is truthful. I want all of us to be able to do that. I want to make sure that I'm walking in this context of greatness and making sure that for me, I want to show up and be great. I
Mm.
want to show up and be my best self. So again, Israel, thank you so very much
Oh.
for your wisdom, for your insight. Making us laugh and at the same time teaching us. But thank you so much for taking the time having this conversation. Again, please, everyone, with all sincerity, make sure that you are following him. Make sure, surely, if this conversation related with you, touched you in some way, make sure that you connect with him. Make sure you connect and subscribe to his podcast and be a part of that. And do me a favor, when you go over there and subscribe, because I know you will, when you go subscribe, let them know I came from the greatness family. Let them know that
Uh-huh.
you came from
That's
over
right.
here, so he can know and see the support and
Mm.
how effective the work that he's doing is for us. So again, thank you so much, sir.
It has been my absolute honor. I'm really grateful to have been given the chance to talk to you firstly,
Yes, sir.
and then to share that more broadly with your audience and your community. And I just have to say, like, for those of you that were watching the video, when Hiram was talking about how much he's valued this conversation and he wants us all to, come to my podcast or come to my website or whatever. If you weren't watching, I was tearing up. I was really moved. And I really wanted to just kind of highlight that as that's me deeply grateful and deeply touched by the sincerity and the love. And I'm really, really thankful to have been invited on to chat.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was an honor to be able to talk with you today and learn. I will not lose your number, nor will we not be friends. We are going to connect for the remainder of our lives because I believe that what you're doing is impactful and is helping us. And so, thank you again, sir. Thank you, everyone that has listened and that is watching, and you continue to be great. I love you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. This video, my heart is, and that I don't do this for myself. I make sure that I am doing this for you to bring you the tools that you need so you can walk in your greatness. So continue with me every Monday, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, as well as you can make sure that you listen to me on all podcast platforms. And let's continue to grow this greatness tribe.